Okay, so now that I've sight read it, let's go ahead and dive right in on the theory of this. So, we're in the key of C major. Starts out with a really simple C chord. So we're just gonna call that 1 right down there. And then we've got another C chord. Amazing. So I'm not even gonna bother to relabel it. You'll notice with a lot of hymns that there's a lot of swapping of voices. So it's the same chord, just revoiced. So then let's look at this. It looks like an A minor. Yeah. So A minor in the key of C is gonna be minor 6. And it's got A in the bass, though it does travel. We'll just call that a passing tone. And then we have this one, looks like E major. And then that resolves to F, which is our 4. So E obviously does not belong in the key of C major because of that G sharp. So that is the 7th of this 4. So I'm going to call that 7 of 4. And then here's our 4 that we resolve to. Maybe I would call that a D minor because 2, 5 with that 4, 3 suspension. You can call this a 2 and then a 5. And there's our half cadence. We got their half cadence. So again, all one chord, it's all G major, just revoiced to give it some melodic movement there. And then we go down to C again. So C, that is an A minor over C. You've still got C in the bass, but really it's still A minor, so that's our 6 again. So, and then we resolve to G again. What on earth is that, guys? Okay, so D, that's a D major chord. D major obviously does not belong in the key of C. So you might be tempted to call this a major 2 like that. That is not correct. Because you're gonna learn, I don't even have to look at this to tell you that's a 5. So what this is actually a 5 of 5. So why? Because D major, and then, so you can hear that's the 5th. So, do. See, that's a resolution to the 5. So we've got our 5 of the 5, because we're still in C major. We haven't left C major. We're still in C major, but we are borrowing this chord from G major. Basically, C major has his best friend G major at the party, and G major's cousin D major gets to come along because, you know, he's his best friend, so why not invite him along to the party too? He doesn't really know C major here. These two are not really friends, but he's friends with G major, so he gets to come along too. So that's our 5 of 5. So we've got our 5 of 5, which resolves to 5, of course, because cousin's gonna stick around. Now, much to my appreciation, they throw it all at the men for a minute, which means I get to just use one hand. That's pretty obviously a 5-1. That's all 1. So that's your 4. So here we have our 5 of 5 again. So watch this D. So we've got D minor here, so we've kind of got a 2 for a second, but then we get to our 5 of 5. D major is obvious because of this F sharp there. That resolves to the G. F sharp goes to the G, so that is a 5 of 5 again, resolving to the 5. Now it's time for the ladies. I would call that kind of a 5, so I'm not going to relabel it because we already have a 5 here. So we've got our 1 here. So if I were to put a bass on this, I would go... So that's a 1-4-1. We've got our so, do, fa, so. Back to 1 here. Same thing again. Now we bring the men back in on this lovely 5. 5. And a lot of times you can tell what these chords are just by watching the bass. Not always, because, you know, sometimes we actually like to give basses a nice part to sing and not just boring. But you can tell that this is a 5-1 just by looking at that bass. That feels like a C. So yeah, I would call that a 1 to a 4. So if you skip these 2 passing tones, that's obviously gonna be a 2 with the F in the bass, so, or you could call it a 2-6. That doesn't mean that there's a 6th in there, that means that we're in first inversion. So now we've changed and we're back at our 5 of 5. 2 5 of 5 to 5 is pretty common. Alright, so got our 5 of 5, that's going to resolve to a 5, we know that, except seems a little interesting because that definitely seems like a 1. We've got our G on the bottom, G, E, G, C, instead of GB. We would expect, instead of, if I can remember right, we call this a 6/4 cadence or something because it's basically a 1, it's a 1/6/4. So we call this a 1/6/4 cadence because it's a 1 chord. When you look at it, it is unmistakably a C major chord, but there's a G in the bass, so it's a 1/6/4, resolves to a 5, and then that resolves to a regular root chord. But you'll see that a lot. That's actually very common. Okay, so now I have sight read it, analyzed it, practiced it a tiny bit just for a few minutes, and now we're going to hear, I guess, the difference in my sight read versus, I'm going to call this learned. It's not really like polished, but it's better than it was before for sure. Okay, so hymn number 2 is The Spirit of God, which is one that I know pretty well, but I wouldn't say that I'm great at playing it. So here's my sight read. So B flat major, first chord almost always in every hymn is going to be the root, so not a surprise there. Revoicing, and then we have our F major. Back to B flat. 1 1 5 5 1 5 7. Laid out really nice for us right there. There's a G minor, so that's going to be a minor 6. There's our 4. Back to our root chord. We've got a little passing tone there, a little neighbor tone. So there's our 5 7 again. Resolve to a 1. Revoicing. So 1. All revoiced to the whole measure. So there's another 5. So there we have a B flat major, so that's just a 1. Back to 4. Again, that's also 4. Just revoiced. Bet you can't imagine what that one is. 1 chord with your 3 in the bass. You could call it a 1 6 if you want to. Back to 4. Brief 4 here for a second. Back to 1. And I'm gonna bet that's a 5. Yep, there's our 5. And then back to 1. Oh, I'm missing one because my hands aren't big enough to reach that. So I have to play with my right hand. Can't do it! Just 5 1 4 1 4 1 5 1. Like, it's just 1 4 5s, guys. So this section is just an exact repeat of the first 2 lines. So we're gonna skip over that. That's all just a big fat one. So now we've got our 5. Yeah, so there's your 5 of 5. Go right back to our 5. F C F A E flat A G. I'll just call that a passing tone. So there's your 1 chord again for a second. That's a 5 7. Back to 1. So we got 1. Pops in just a quick little 5 there. And back to 1. Our 4. 5 7. Yeah, if you ever get confused by one of these because they're stacked, so bring that bass up and then just walk it down until you find out where the root is. Then that will show you very plainly what chord you're working with. And then back to B. B flat, which is a 1. It's another 5 7. Just a very stretched out one. Back to 1. And here's your half cadence. 5, 5, not 1. And then this is 1. 5, 1, 5, 1. 4, 5, 7. So there's a 1, a 5 with a neighbor tone. So a lot of times if they're playing a 7th chord, they will omit the 5th, C major 7. But remember, when we have that accidental there, and it's the 7, C 7, 1, we know almost certainly that that's going to be a 5 of 5. So we've got our 5, 7 of 5 to our 5, and we walk that bass down 1 again, and then your 5, 7 again, B, D, F, right there spelled out for you. So these are just lovely passing tones to add some melody to this. So that's all just 1. Now we're up to 4. So when you don't know what something is, one of the best things to do is to look at what's after it. What does it resolve to? So it resolves to a 1, so that could be a lot of things. My best guess is that that's a 2. It could also just be a continuation of that 4, which is probably, I guess, more likely. You've got E, G, E, C. So that does look like a 2 to me. This is the same thing we were talking about at the last hymn, where it's a 1 chord, but it starts, you have your 5th in the bass. So that's a 1, 6, 4, and then we have 2 5s, and then back to 1. So this is, again, your 6, 4 suspension there. So this is a really common thing that we're going to see constantly as we look at these hymns, that 6, 4 suspension there.